Welcome everyone to our second CMO series webinar. We're going to be looking at the war on talent and opportunities for today's CMOs. And we're lucky to be joined by Michael Rynowecer, who will speak to our lovely Senior Vice President of our commercial team here in the UK. That's Williek, and you'll probably recognise his dulcet tones from many of our CMO series podcasts. So those of you familiar with the podcast, we're on, I think, 122 episodes plus specials so far. And this webinar series is an extension of that, where we're speaking to some people within the industry live on this webinar with you, which will be recorded and shared on the podcast. So without any further ado, we will be looking at in today's session, the current landscape for legal CMOs, insights into that CMO mobility and why CMOs are kind of moving around within the industry. And that's from research conducted by Michael at BTI Consulting, who's joined us today over the past 3 years. He's going to look at some of those top triggers for those transitions within the industry, everything from culture through to compensation. And we're going to be looking at the implications for law firms and how leaders can empower their CMOs in order to retain the industry's best talent. And I'm going to pass over to Will and Michael, who can take it from here.
Thanks, Charlie. Yeah, and welcome again, everyone, to a live version of Passle CMO series webinar, which I've never done before. It's quite exciting. My name's Williek. I'm on the commercial team here at Passle, as we've already said. Very excited to be joined by Michael Rynowecer. I've been practicing the surname all week, so hopefully I nailed that, Michael. Michael is joining us from BTI Consulting Group that he founded. Some of you guys might know him already from a lot of research that these guys do. Welcome, Michael. How are we doing today? Did you have a good Thanksgiving?
I did. Thank you very much. I was able to rest up for today, so I'm pretty excited.
That's the main thing. Lots of research, as I say, that comes out of BTI. We are going to be talking about the war on talent and I suppose the opportunities for CMOs currently, but also very much future CMOs in the legal space, in the professional service space. I interestingly came across that research because a CMO in the US shared it on LinkedIn, which is obviously, power of the network. And I found it really interesting. And of course, I did a little Passle summary of that. And we ended up here. Can you give us a bit more of a deep dive, a bit more of a background into that research, sort of how you gathered it, what you were looking to find out?
Sure. We've been interviewing, researching, formally conducting surveys with CMOs for just about 20 years now. And, some of the questions, interestingly, have remained the same. Others have changed as the times have evolved. What we found is, especially as we headed into the pandemic years, there was starting to be a lot more different viewpoints, different thoughts, different strategies. And we saw stress, we saw excitement, we saw challenge, and every CMO seemed to, have a little bit of each of those at some point as it unfolded. Then as things, moved back to post crisis anyway, we started to again see this movement and see law firms handle and manage and recruit their CMOs differently. So we started talking to the CMOs about it. And we also talked to some leadership partners about it. And we, the first thing that really jumped out to us, which said, okay, things are different now, is, over the last 3 years, 28% of CMOs at law firms have moved somewhere. Roughly a third of those were promotions, 2/3 of those were lateral movements. And that's in addition to the 15% that just left. Some may have retired, some went other places, some went to other industries. So we started digging in and saying, okay, if we've got that kind of movement, if we've talked to the leadership and they're thinking about marketing differently, we wanted to understand kind of where the thinking was, what CMOs were thinking, what it meant for them. And that's really what led to, a lot of the research we published around this so far and what we're going to talk about today.
And what were, I mean, you mentioned a few of the things there, 28% changed firm. I mean, in terms of standout findings, is that surprising to you? I mean, what's the current state of play with that figure in mind? Because when I did share, the summary of your research with a few CMOs, some were surprised, some actually came back and sort of said, it's not as high as I thought it was. So what's your sort of take on that in terms of the standout pieces?
Well, my observation is I think 28% is high. I think, if you go into other industries and other professions, you will find that number, just not as high. It typically would be, the most over a 3-year period, you'll find maybe 12, 15% turnover. So this is almost double that. And so, in terms of being, noteworthy, we thought that was particularly noteworthy. I think as we talked to CMOs, we had the same reaction that you, although most thought it was high, there were a few that thought it was, not surprising at all. Those CMOs, interestingly, tended to be ones that get, let's say, more calls from recruiters than others. So their, reference point might be a little bit different because what we've observed is there's a group of CMOs that are always getting the calls. There are some that get, most of the calls, a few of the calls. So depending how actively you are on the recruiting circuit will impact how you view that. But in our view, that's quite high. And it speaks a lot to what it means for, to be a law firm CMO, CMBDO, which I'll use interchangeably, even though I know they may not be the same. But, if you're working in an industry where there's high demand because the turnover creates demand for your role, and it's not unusual to see compensation rise, which is what you're seeing. I don't think that's the only factor, but I think that's one factor. You're seeing changes in law firm strategy, which means that CVM BDOs may or may not be the right fit for the way a law firm wants to go. And then, we've also seen a lot of, I've been watching the industry for probably longer than I, may want to remember, but a few decades. And I have not seen as much, as many firms taking aggressive, progressive steps in their strategy and their marketing and business development with an equal amount taking steps backwards. It's one thing to stay the same and watch and see what everyone does, but it's very much another to step back. And if you're a CMO with any kind of ambition and you're working at a firm where they're either not moving forward or especially stepping back, there's a high likelihood that that's one of your exit signs, that, okay, I don't want to be in a firm that is retrenching and doesn't want to invest in the place where I have my skill set and my knowledge and where I could help a firm. So those were some of the kind of standout results that we think at a very high level speak to the trend and speak to the very personal impact on the law firm CMOs.
And was there anything else? We talked about standout stats. Was there anything that was really surprising from your point of view? I mean, as you say, the 28% is really high when benchmarked against other industries, but was there anything else that you sort of thought, wow, I didn't think that would happen?
I think that one or two things that stood out, which are non-quantitative at all, is most of the law firm CMOs that we know and we've talked to for a long time, and even our new friends, have developed this very strong resilience to all this. Years ago, it was a very frustrating, and it still is very frustrating, but they seem to be able to kind of put it in context and say, okay, this is where we're at, this is what we're doing, this is how it affects my career, and being quite systematic about, saying, well, I know maybe I should leave or maybe I should make a move, but I'm going to make the right move. I'm not going to make a move. And they're more resilient, they're more systematic, they're able to kind of not sweat the small stuff, in some cases not even sweat some of the bigger stuff. They were able to brush aside the challenges that come with changes in strategy, and most importantly, the changes that come in leadership. That's one side of it. Another surprising finding was there's a group of law firm CMOs, I would say probably maybe 12 to 15% of the total, that have developed these almost, personal advisor roles with the head of the law firm, whether it's a chair, whether it's a managing partner, whatever their title is. And they truly are advising. They truly are part of the fundamental fabric of where the firm is going. There were always a few of those, but we're starting to see that cohort grow. That was both encouraging, and that was, I'm not sure surprising is the right word because it's welcome, but still, I would put it in the category of, given everything that's going on, the fact that this group has a leadership that turned to them and they were able to develop those relationships, I think speaks to a lot of opportunity for CMOs as they move forward, and some of the things that make a CMO happy in their role. So I think that the other surprise, which we're hearing from a few CMOs, not all, and we observe, is salaries seem to be skyrocketing. They're just going way up. They're following partners per profit, profits per partner. They are, law firms have always paid, generally speaking, well, and they're really, really raising what they're paying and what they're willing to shell out for what they perceive to be top talent. So that's going to put a lot of pressure on other law firms that haven't done that yet. And it's going to put a lot of pressure on firms where they have a long time CMO, because it takes about 30 seconds for those increases to get around the industry. So law firms will have to work harder to make sure that compensation doesn't become a paramount issue.
Yeah, it's fascinating, but I suppose it's, we often hear, and you must have heard it way more than me, but lots of CMOs want this seat at the table, and I guess with the rising wages, partnerships are valuing that now, and they're pricing them accordingly. The thing I really wanted to dig into, because I know there's a mix on this webinar of UK and US firms, and we play in both markets as well. So I just wondered if there was nuances that you'd seen between the two markets, between the UK, US. Obviously, US, from my perspective, they have more lofty titles in terms of CMOs. Law firms in the US have more CMOs in general, that title, that chief title. But it seems like we are seeing a bit of a trend of, especially ones that are both sides of the pond, that there's a few more CMOs sort of popping up in the UK as well now. I wondered what your sort of take was.
We're definitely seeing that, and so that's the same trend. We're both seeing the same thing there. The only thing we noticed is that the UK-based firms primarily have a larger set of client-facing tools that are embedded in the firm. So that would be client listening, that would be account-based management, that would be business development. Seems to be a little bit more of the fabric of a UK firm than it is a US firm. But those were the things that kind of jumped out at us in terms of the differences between the two areas.
Thank you. Yeah, that is quite interesting, especially as you say. I mean, a lot of the client listening programs we've had on the podcast, actually, people have been talking quite heavily about them. And if there are any UK, this is a shout out actually, if there are any UK heads of marketing CMOs that want to jump on the podcast, then please do reach out, because we do seem to be having quite a lot of the US ones jumping on and talking about what they're doing. So it'd be good to get some UK ones on as well. In terms of the reaction and the research, I mentioned that quite a well-known CMO. I picked it up on LinkedIn because she sort of posted that. What's the reaction been about the research, and did you find that people were reaching out, and were there any particularly strong sort of comments about what you guys put out there?
We had a lot of strong comments. I would say of the 14 years we've been publishing the blog and the 20 some odd years we've been doing the research, this is one of the more active posts and pieces of research that we've put out there. A lot of CMOs want to, first they want to contextualize it for themselves, because they're in a firm, they're trying to situate themselves and see, what it means for them. Some shared frustrations. Some said, they didn't realize maybe how much better they have it than what they perceive others. But there were so many opinions and a lot of discussion about how to deal with some of the things we talked about. Like, one of the things we haven't spent a lot of time on, but I want to say that somewhere between 15 and 20% of all firm leaders, so the actual whoever is running the firm, have stepped down in the last 3 years. So it's a little bit less than the CMOs, and another 15 to 20% are going to be stepping down in the next 2 to 3 years. So they very much are trying to figure out what that means for them, because one of the things that's unique about law firms is that a change in leadership can result in a change in strategy and a change in culture. And most CMOs are pretty astute, so they have a sense of when there might be a change in leadership, and they don't want to be in a situation where they're uncomfortable with the new direction of the firm. And interestingly, I'll just throw in that is not unique to CMOs. We talk to just as many partners who have said, I've looked at the candidates for the next slew of potential leaders of the firm, and I think I should probably make a move because they don't like it. So, a lot of discussions around what those things mean, how to read the tea leaves, what the opportunities really are, how to tell which firms are really the ones that are committed. Because very few CMOs go out on interviews and come back and say, well, this firm has no commitment to building out this, strength within the firm, because the firm's put on a very good face. But how do you read behind that? How do you poke at it to make sure that you're not getting the tagline and the advertising version? What's it really like there? And how do they figure that out? Those were big points of discussion.
Yeah, I guess it's that classic thing where you don't know what the culture's like until you actually get there sometimes, right? In terms of, and again, we've actually set something up in the US, or our CEO has, called Changemakers, where the idea is, you get a bunch of CMOs that haven't been in the position that long, so sort of under 3 years. We get them talking, sharing ideas, and helping each other, bringing them through as a sort of cohort to share their good things, bad things, what's working, what's not. What does this all sort of mean career-wise for CMOs? Because you've touched on a few of the things there, but how does it sort of impact their day-to-day and their thinking?
I think overall it has a positive effect and presents more opportunity, because the law firms that are either newly aggressive or have always been aggressive are going to set the tone, and they are going to grow faster than everybody else. They'll have higher profits than everybody else, and they will have some very visible wins. That inevitably will convince other law firms that are cutting back or are somehow retrenching that is not a direction to go. So I think that the successes will become visible and will influence the other firms. Secondly, is the growth in the abundance of tools and strategies that these CMOs can bring to the table. Now, with the advent of digital marketing, with the growth of LinkedIn now becoming more important than websites, there's just so many different strategies and tools that you can use. The more that you can bring them in, the more value it's going to provide, to those firms. And then, you also look at it. One of the interesting things over the last, we'll say 2 to 3, maybe 4 years, is that you've got at least 2 to 3 partner classes that never had to even think about business development to be billable. You had all this work walking in the door, and law firms were capacity bound and couldn't deliver. And those partners are going to fall into 2 camps. One is, oh my God, I better learn about marketing, BD, client service, and all those things that live within the domain of the CMO. And you're going to have a group of those who say, I don't need to learn that. And then, we're not going to focus on those. There's going to be enough of the partners who realize that they need these resources, that they need these strategies to be able to build their careers, especially because A, it's getting harder to be a partner. And perhaps more importantly, I personally have observed maybe 5 world crises. And every time there's a big economic crisis, business development just gets a lot harder, and it never goes back to where it was. So between it being harder to get clients, the group of partners that is going to need this more than any group of partners has in the last 20 years, and the new tools and the new strategies and the newly aggressive firms, that just adds up to opportunity for CMOs as we look forward. And if you want to throw compensation in there, that doesn't hurt either.
Yeah, I think we found the same thing. And actually, the CMOs that can now execute that plan, they're being leaned on a lot harder for their expertise, which is what they've been trying to do for quite a while, right?
Right, exactly. They're getting attention, and that's a good thing in most cases.
What in terms of okay, we've got a good CMO here. We need to retain he or she and the team. What do you think firms could be doing differently in terms of what you've seen?
A couple of things, from big to small to procedural and all over the map. Number one is, if I'm a law firm leader, I would make dedicated time on a systematic basis, one-on-one time with my CMO. That is one of the most important things for the successful CMOs, is to know it isn't just the access, although that's nice. But it's getting their perspective, it's getting their thinking, it's fleshing out the details. But perhaps most importantly, it tells everybody else in the firm that these individuals have the implicit approval and authority to do what they're doing. And that makes all the difference in the world if you're going out and talking to partners and asking them to do things, and attorneys. It just helps your gravitas. So I think the law firms that make that time, and the CMOs that I know do that, they just seem much more confident. They're more successful. They bring new and innovative ideas on a regular basis, and they just get a lot done. So that's number one. I would say number two is, keep an eye on the comp, because if they get out of line, it's a very hard battle to come back and say, okay, we're going to give you a 40% raise to match the market as they're walking out the door. You want to be proactive, and you want to be you want to make sure that you are level set at a minimum, if not leading the market in terms of comp. I think that law firms this goes back to leadership, would be well served by sending the messages that the CMOs are there for very specific roles and are to be taken seriously. There are firms as of today that still walk up to CMOs where partners have no problem saying, you realize you're just part of overhead, or please remove me from all your emails because I know how to get clients. Those things are just rude. And, many CMOs can shrug them off, but, you just don't want people saying that about you. And, I've noticed that some firms where I've observed the managing partner just saying to different partners, we don't do that. Don't do that. If you want to think that by yourself, think it, but keep it to yourself. We're trying to build a world-class organization, and that doesn't contribute in any positive way. And that takes a strong leader. But it's the difference between having someone who, again, believes they have the implicit authority to do what they need to do, and those that don't. Outside of that, I would say, and this is on two counts, listen, CMOs have a lot of ideas which may be well understood by people in the law firm marketing world, but may or may not be understood by law firm leaders. I would advise law firm leaders to, listen to 3-4 times to these ideas before they say yes or no, frankly, and to give everything the fair shot that it deserves. I don't, most of the CMOs that I know understand that not everything they propose is going to be approved, but they want to feel like they got a fair shot. It isn't just rejected because, oh, we don't do that this way, or no other firm does this, so we won't do it. They very much want to know it was considered. So, and I think that comes, and goes back to the idea that, you're part of a team and doing whatever you can to make the CMO and the team feel like they're part of the firm. And then finally, what I would add is share way more information than you believe is, or certainly that most firms are sharing now. I can't tell you, I've had at least 20 CMOs over time telling me that they thought it was fascinating, that they know everything about the client base, they know what the revenue is, they know who likes them, they know who doesn't like the firm, they know which partners piss off clients on a regular basis, but they can't see the firm's strategic plan. And they're like, well, how am I supposed to support you if I don't see the strategic plan because the firm thinks it's too confidential, or they don't share certain other information about whether it be inappropriate partner behavior, or going back to the beginning of the pandemic, there were 2 CMOs that said, they found themselves, they learned that they were in meetings with people who were exposed to COVID 2 weeks after those meetings occurred, and that leadership knew. So, there's got to be this inclusion and sharing that will, again, make the CMO feel like they're part of the fabric of the firm, whether it's trivial things or strategic things. Every little thing is a brick in the foundation of the relationship.
There's sharing and then not sharing in the case of the virus, though, right?
Right, exactly.
I think, what you're saying now. I mean, I was speaking to a CMO recently, and she said, "Look, I've got the autonomy to try stuff. I can try it. I know it's not all going to stick. It's not all going to be a success, but I am getting the ability to try the stuff." So she was very happy with that, and actually she's a new CMO, so she's got a very close relationship with the leadership, and they trust her plan. So I think that's always a good benchmark. The research also mentioned, sometimes it can take CMOs 2 years to get there. I think you used the expression sea legs. Is that normally understood by managing partners? Or, I mean, the way I'm angling this is probably, as we all know, some of those big firms, it seems like the CMOs, they need to do something very, very quickly in a 1-year cycle. Otherwise, they're sometimes gone again. Do you think that's a problem? Do you think the managing partners and the leadership know that?
I think they know it. Whether they have the patience to deal with it is a whole separate question. It's funny because we did a big survey of managing partners, And they will tell you it takes them 2 years to get their sea legs. So they know. But, you're managing a law firm with all these partners, and, they may or may not be cognizant of it. And I know when I'm talking to newer CMOs, we talk about the 2 years it takes, but it also what it takes to get those sea legs and what it takes to get the credibility. And, you're right, it often takes some kind of win. Whether you help a rainmaker in a big way, and the rainmaker, goes out and basically gives you an endorsement. Even small things like, having a substantive role at the firm retreat. And, some of it also goes to the CMOs. I know CMOs who take, new CMO roles and they don't leave their office for 6 or 7 months. And I know others that on, day 6, they're out on the road meeting partners. So, I think that some of that can be managed and dealt with by the CMOs to try to shorten that life cycle. And, whenever you meet with a partner, try to bring something useful. Not every partner will find it useful. Not every partner will want it. But the ones that do will get you to those sea legs. And that feedback gets back to the leadership very quickly. And that's the kind of thing that kind of supports them. I find it's the CMOs where, they're not as aggressive in going out. Some of them will wait for the firm to give them direction, which usually doesn't come in terms of how to onboard yourself. So, and the best law firm leaders will sit down with a CMO and say, okay, here's the X number of partners you need to meet with. You need to have these partners on your side. You need to, have relationships. You need to learn from them. They will teach you about the firm, their practices. So I think that that's something that could be managed, but it's something that requires active management. It won't just happen by itself.
Yeah, we've often heard the term, we just need a sort of trophy project, trophy
Right.
project to build the trust, to get everyone on board. And sometimes, again, you talk about new CMOs and having that project, but they also need to win over, I suppose they're inheriting a whole team sometimes, aren't they, as well?
They are. They are. And, if you've got a team where somebody was passed over, that can be a challenge. And, making peace is always but you have to know that. Not every CMO will know that when they walk in the door. So, but you're right, you've got to build your team as well. And all the things we've said about how to create the successful CMO, you can just take and overlay on the CMOs with their teams, communicate, tell them what you're trying to do, listen, give them a voice. Those are the same things that build your team.
I suppose that, you talked about the compensation, you talked about the comp. That does get, lots of applicants in terms of a law firm trying to get a new CMO. If they feel unwelcome when they get there, if it's not all it's cracked up to be, what else could the firm leaders do outside of compensation in terms of support? What else could do you feel like they could add for a CMO in terms of support?
I think that, having those one-on-one sessions we talked about, especially in the beginning, how are you doing? And, if you, feel comfortable saying it's not going as well as I'd like, what, asking for advice. The one thing these law firm leaders know is they know their partners. And, they want you to be successful. So they will tell you, who to meet with. Sometimes they'll tell you what, topics to talk about, or who's got passion around certain initiatives and projects. But I think that the law firm leader that doesn't step in is starting to set themselves up for what could be a less than optimal relationship.
We've talked about a few opportunities that you've seen for CMOs in the current climate. Those coming through the ranks, we've also mentioned, the future CMOs. What do you see the biggest opportunity for those type of people is currently?
Well, I think that, you're going to see continued turnover because you've got this bifurcation of strategy. So whenever there's turnover, there's opportunity, especially if you can catch a firm that is changing its tune and moving to the upside of becoming more aggressive. I think that the individual skills in a firm, I think the law firms are going to get a lot bigger than they are, and that's going to create opportunity. I remember when law firm departments were, 4 people, 8 people, 12 people. They're going to be much bigger. They're going to have more skills. They're going to be more strategic. And so there's opportunity where they are if you're an aggressive firm. And I think that, CMO opportunities will come along if that's what, you want to do. But I think that, we're going to be in a sustained period where law firms will get bigger. There'll be a measurable group of law firms that will become more aggressive, creating opportunities. They will have bigger marketing and business development departments. They will be doing and setting the trends for what marketing and business development looks like. And if I'm in legal marketing and working for a law firm, that's probably where I want to make sure I am and I want to be.
Being very topical, how do you sort of see things like mergers? You talk about, those are aggressive. There's lots of strategies out there with the bigger firms where their strategy is to be quite aggressive and to acquire other firms. What's your take on that in terms of, is there going to be well, I'm a CMO here, I'm a CMO. How do we squeeze into one? Do you think it's going to create, I know one particular US firm, Vincent & Elkins, they actually have 3 chiefs, right? They've split it into 3 different roles now. So they haven't got a CMO. They've gone a new direction. Do you see that it'll open out, new areas like that?
I think that you'll continue to see growth of people in charge of individual areas, but I think you'll move back to ultimately there will be one individual that manages those individual sections. I think that the coordination, the strategic coordination demanded of all those functions will ultimately be required to report in to one of the most, a more senior individual to make sure that they're going in the direction that they want to go and everything is integrated and synchronized.
And do you have one piece of advice, if I was to press you, which I am, that you would give to CMOs, sort of navigating the market currently?
I would say, one, it would be prudent to keep your eyes open because you don't know what's out there. Second, make a realistic assessment of where you are at your firm. What are your opportunities? Are you an aggressive firm? Are you a retrenching firm? Are you a neutral firm? I would say that I have never heard of a CMO, second chair marketer, third chair marketer ever being admonished for helping partners. It's to me, it sounds like you're a law firm marketer at a law firm, and there are law firm marketers who don't like to work with partners, and maybe there's certainly legitimate reasons why. But the more you help partners be successful, the more successful you will be. That doesn't mean you take on other projects. And that sounds like it's so simple, but I talk to so many, especially, not so much CMOs, but the second chairs or somebody reporting in who, there are so many things to do that don't necessarily support the partners directly. And, making sure that you have a portion of your responsibilities where you are helping partners, and that partner help is, somehow results in something visible to that partner. Those are the things that I have found that partners appreciate, and that so many law firm marketers enjoy. And then when you've got something where your partners appreciate it, you've got something you enjoy, if the partners are happy, the CMO is likely to be happy. And if those two people are happy, the leadership is probably going to be happy, and you're probably doing something right in the marketplace. So that would be my fundamental advice. And if my other piece of advice is, when you go on interviews, take those rose-colored glasses off as soon as you leave. And just really, if I can just go off on a tangent for 30 seconds or so, I talked to a CMO I know particularly well, and they very much wanted to be a CMO at an elite firm in New York. Got an interview, was supposed to have 4 interviews on one day. First interview was on time. Second interview was 25 minutes late. Third interview was 40 minutes late. Fourth interview was blown off. And the CMO called me and said, wow, it was great. I had these great interviews. And I felt really bad when I said, okay, so run this by me again. One person blew you off, and 2 were late, and 1 met with you on time. And they didn't give reasons like I'm in court or a client, because that happens, and I get that. But they just didn't make the time. And you have to say to yourself, okay, so what's it like to work there if they can't take the time to talk to me in the interview process? You have to be really, really, really have a lot of self-honesty going on.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I suppose, you know, that person probably didn't take the one that didn't turn up, right?
It's a crazy world out there.
Yeah, exactly. And well, the relationship's going to be exactly as you say. It's going to start off like that. That's how it's going to run from moving forward. Do we have, because I'm conscious of time now, do we have any questions for Michael at all from anyone? If you do, please put them in the Q&A and we can answer them now. Here we go. Have you got any advice for those CMOs who might work in those types of environments you just mentioned to play a part in changing the culture of the firm? Good question.
It is. And I think that, it starts with changing the culture in your department, but also changing how you interface with, the partners and the leadership. I mean, if you are in a firm where the leadership doesn't want to meet with you, you go and you ask for those meetings. You make your case. And then if they don't want to meet with you, then you've got a message and you've got a piece of information. But I know managing partners that I've heard from that have said just the opposite to me, which is, I don't understand why my CMO doesn't want to, meet with me more often, why they don't talk to me, why they don't, share their plans with me. So you've got 2 sides of the equation, and a lot of CMOs are surprised by that. But I'm getting off topic, so I apologize. I think if you want to change the culture is, start engaging in the behaviors of the culture you want to have. Culture, behaviors, especially positive behaviors, are contagious. If you're, I know one CMO that when they took a new role, they said one of the things they do when they walk down the hall is they smile at everyone. Everyone they see, they just smile and nod instead of just walking by, because they want to be friendly. They don't know them because they're new, but and then they get feedback that, like, well, other people smile back, and like people noticed it. So if you're in that environment, I would do the things that I can control, and see if that makes an impact. And most of the time it'll work to your benefit, because I'm always surprised at the number of leadership partners or partners who say, well, I've never heard from our CMO. I've never met the CMO. I've never seen them except at a retreat. So there could be a lot of opportunity if you're in that culture. And I think we did a survey. It's on my blog site, where 12% of attorneys and CMOs see their law firm as toxic. And yes, they exist, and you don't want to be there. But that leaves another 90% where we got a shot. So hopefully, I'm guessing, most of the people hopefully in this call are not in that cohort, and they have the opportunity to engage in those behaviors to make it the culture that they think would be best and for everybody.
Great stuff. I think we're probably going to call it a wrap here. There's no other questions. Michael, thank you so much for giving such great insight. Thank you for giving us your time and your knowledge. Oh, no, I lied. We've got one more. You mentioned that there are CMOs who are not involved with strategic planning or have access to the plan. Seems like a strong indicator that it's not a firm that values the position or its role in leadership.
I think that's correct. I think, in the firms where I see that, the CMOs in the marketing department, A, tend to be smaller, and B, they tend to be more task oriented. Like, we need this proposal by Sunday. We need X, we need Y. There isn't a, the value added is by definition limited. They are given instructions and asked to deliver on those instructions. And most people in those environments are not high on the job satisfaction scale.
Is there an argument to say with a new CMO as well, if they're trying to bring a plan to the table in quite an advanced interview, surely they need a bit of access to what the strategic plan is then anyway when they're coming in? Right.
Well, you could, the incoming interview, the interview process is a two-way street, although most people don't view it that way. I'm not sure it's question one, but certainly somewhere in the interview process is, at what point do I see the firm's strategic plan? And if they say you don't, well, boy, that's an indicator. If they say after 6 months, if they say after 2 years, if they say on day one, you're going to get different answers, but that will tell you a lot. And it generally, to the best of my knowledge, most recruiters don't counsel this way because, they have different objectives. But asking those questions, like how often does the leadership partner meet with the CMO? When do we see the strategic plan? What's my role in developing the strategic plan? What committees would I be on? Those are all questions that will give you very strong indications of what to expect. Great. I know that this is being recorded, so that will go out on our CMO series podcast channel next week, I believe. And we're also going to share this with everyone that attended as well. You'll get a copy of this on email. So again, thank you so much, Michael. It's been a pleasure having you on. It's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me. And thanks to everyone that turned up today. Thank you.